This program is brought to you by Community Trust Bank, Medical City, Bid Select, and the Neely School of Business at TCU. Welcome to Platforms, the life-lifting news program for women. Now, here's your host, Shivaun Palmer.
Hey, welcome everybody to Platforms, the life-lifting news program for women. This week we're broadcasting from the law offices of Jackson Walker, which is a Texas-based law firm with over 300 attorneys in 6 cities in the state of Texas. Today I'm delighted to introduce Retta Miller. She is a partner here in the Dallas office. She specializes in litigation. She's had a stellar career and has been very passionate about devoting time and effort to the causes of women and girls. Retta, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
I am delighted. Okay, before we get into the law specifically, let's give our audience a little bit of background about you. Where were you born?
I grew up on a farm in northwestern Oklahoma.
A farm girl, okay. What part of Oklahoma?
The northwest part side, outside of Enid.
Enid, Oklahoma, okay. How about your life growing up? Did you have any siblings?
I have an older brother and a younger sister.
Okay.
And I mean,
so right in the middle, right? The middle kid?
The middle child.
Yes. So were you the peacemaker like many middle kids
No,
are?
I probably broke all the rules in terms of middle child. I tended to boss everybody around.
So you're prepping for your law career, right? How about your parents? What kind of influence did they have on you?
Oh, I mean, I think my parents influenced me in many ways, but I think a couple in particular is the work ethic that they instilled in me. I mean, obviously growing up on a farm, lots of long days, and
Sure.
at an early age learned to really work hard at whatever you did and to accomplish.
What kind of farm was it? Did you raise?
Wheat and cattle.
Wheat and cattle. Okay, super. So, when did you decide the law was kind of the direction you were going to go in? I mean, did you have other career thoughts as a young?
Well,
girl?
actually, it's a second career for me.
Okay.
I did not graduated from college and worked for about 7 years for Oklahoma State University, and then made a decision at that point to go to law school.
Was there like a watershed moment, or was there something that had happened personally that you thought the law is something you might want to pursue?
It had always been an interest. I mean, I'd been involved in as growing up in things like debate and speech and those kinds of things. But when I got out of college, I was really anxious to go to work, get involved, and I had been active in the 4-H program as growing up, and was interested in doing something to kind of give back to the community a bit. So, thought I would work for a couple of years and then maybe think about law school. And next thing you know, it's 7 years later, and decided that if I was going to do it, it was time to really focus on it.
Yeah, move on. Now, let me ask you. I think you went to Northwestern, if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken. Fantastic law school up in the Chicago area. Why did you decide to go to that particular school?
Well, when I decided to go to law school, I really looked at law schools outside of Oklahoma because I really wanted to broaden my horizons and think about, did I want to be in a city, in an urban area? What was I really interested in? And Northwestern turned out to be kind of the right mix in terms of, because it's in the city, it's in the heart of Chicago. The size of the law, class was a relatively small class for a nationally ranked school. There were about 200 in my law school class, and so it just seemed to be the right mix.
Talk about some of the professors that influenced you, because I know that people are impacted by various people in their lives, but particularly in this law school setting. Were there many women in law school during that time?
By the time I was in law school, about 40% of the class was women.
Okay, so there was a good
because I started in
percentage.
1982 and graduated in 85, and so
Right.
by then we had about 40% were women.
Okay, and then how did you decide on your specialization? Because I know that litigation is an area you get into, and we'll start with civil litigation. Why don't you give our audience an example of the type of clients you deal with in that category of the law?
Sure. Well, once I decided to go to law school, I really knew that I wanted to be involved in litigation. And while I was in law school, I participated in the moot court program and took the trial aid classes and worked in a legal clinic and those kinds of things. So I knew that was my focus. In terms of civil litigation, mostly I represent financial institutions or corporations in litigation that they're involved in. And it can be either as a plaintiff or as a defendant, but it's typically businesses who I represent as opposed to individuals or that type of thing.
Okay, and then I know you also deal in arbitration. Why don't you, because by design I am the stupidest person on this program, I'm the layperson, define arbitration.
Well, unlike a courtroom where you have a judge and a jury, an arbitration is a much more informal process. And you may have, your arbitration takes place in a conference room, very much like we're sitting in now. And your decision makers happen to be the three arbitrators. It could be 3 arbitrators or it could be 1 arbitrator. And they act as the judge and jury in the arbitration proceeding as opposed to a judge or a jury in a courtroom. So it's a little bit more informal process in terms of how you do it, because it's a much smaller environment, but it's basically the same skills, the same techniques. There's much less discovery before you get to arbitration, so it's a little bit more like trying cases in the old days when it was trial by ambush, when you don't have a deposition or you don't have testimony from the witness beforehand. You have to go in and kind of play it by ear based on what the witness says. So it's that's the part I think is really fun, because you get to it's a challenge to see if you can stay ahead of a witness when you've never questioned him before until they sit down across from you.
So a lot of it's gut instinct. As a young attorney, do you remember years ago some of your first trials, and what did you learn from some of those experiences? I mean, I'm sure maybe in your mind you might have made some mistakes initially as a young attorney, and then how do you take that and become a phenomenal attorney like you are today? I mean, you're highly respected in your field.
Well, every time you try a case, I think any good trial lawyer will look back and say, okay, what could I have done differently, or is there something I could have done, that type of thing. And I think one of the things you learn as a young lawyer is you learn to trust your instincts. I think one of the things that I learned is, if in my gut it says, don't ask that next question,
don't ask it,
don't make that argument, then you just have to learn to trust your instinct, because if your instincts are telling you not to do something or to do something and you don't follow them, generally you regret it.
Right. Let's talk about some of the more memorable trials that you've been involved with. I know that a couple years ago you were with a 5-person team for this particular trial. I think it lasted 2+ months, and it was quite remarkable. It was written up. Tell us about that. Kind of take us through that whole scenario.
Well, it was an interesting case because our client was a Japanese company who was sued in San Antonio. And so it was a very potentially hostile environment for the client to be in. And although it was a publicly traded company in Japan, they had never had any litigation. So the whole concept of litigation, much less litigation in the United States, was completely foreign to them.
I can imagine.
In that regard. And so it was very interesting, but the federal judge on the bench, who is now on the Fifth Circuit, was very good in terms of making the courtroom accessible to people who didn't speak English. I mean, it was all the testimony was translated.
Wow.
But did his best to make the whole process comfortable for them. But it was a very interesting, we went back and forth to Japan to prep witnesses and to meet with witnesses and that kind of thing. So it was it's probably, to this point in my career, the most interesting case that I've ever worked on.
What city in Japan was this particularly?
The client was based in Tokyo.
It was in Tokyo.
Although they had offices in other parts of the country as well.
And I mean, just to add on the fact that the cultural differences in the language, that must have been remarkable to kind of work your way through that and gain trust, because I know in that society, many times it takes years for businesses to gain trust with a Japanese client. So,
well, and that's true. And I had a bit of an additional hurdle in that I was a woman, and when I would go to Japan and we would meet in the client's office, the only other women in the office were the women serving tea.
Right.
I mean, it was a very traditional Japanese company.
Yeah.
And it took a bit of time until, for me personally, to gain the respect of the clients. And but I knew I was there when I defended the deposition of the president of the company, and he came out and said to people, "Miss Miller defended me well." And so
the ultimate compliment from.
And so once they saw me in action, and once they had been through a deposition and felt like I had taken care of them in the process, I mean, once I gained their respect, then they could not have been more grateful, more respectful of me as an individual and that type of thing. But there were culture. I mean, it's just a different.
Sure.
Anytime you deal with somebody who has a different culture, you have to be cognizant of those cultural differences and work within them.
Absolutely. Can you hold that thought? Because I'd love to continue this conversation on some of the international clientele you've dealt with. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Shivaun Palmer with Platforms, a life-lifting news program for women. We'll be back with Retta Miller with Jackson Walker Law Firm in just a moment.
Jackson Walker is a Texas-based law firm with more than 300 attorneys in Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Angelo, and San Antonio. The firm regularly represents clients in such areas as corporate and securities, litigation, intellectual property, healthcare, energy, labor and employment, legislative and regulatory, real estate, and international law. The firm's corporate clients include Fortune 500 companies, multinational corporations, major financial institutions, and a wide range of publicly traded corporations and closely held businesses. For more info, go to www.jw.com. Jackson Walker, Texas-based, global reach.